I'm coming in loud and clear. Might hear me on the radio. Breaker, breaker, 19. Anybody got their ears on?
Hey guys, it's Eric here at Farpoint Farms, and tonight we're going to be going over mobile CB antennas. If you're going to put a CB in your car, and you should, you're going to need a decent antenna in order to get the range and the usage out of it that you really want to get. To do that, you're going to have to pick the right antenna. So today we're going to go over my top 3 picks, and we're going to start with my third pick. We're going to go from bottom to top on this. My third pick for a good antenna is the Tram 300. And here's a picture of it here. Here's a few pictures of it actually. Now the Tram 300 is nearly identical to the Little Will, which is pictured here, or the K30 antenna, which is pictured here. I own a K30 as well. They're basically the same antenna, and this is the first part of what I want to talk about, and that is that Tram, Wilson, and K40 or K30 products, they're all owned by the same parent company. If you weren't aware of that, now you are. So they're just like tiers, each one offering slightly better, I don't know what, but something. You know, they want to sell the K40 or K30 in this case as the premier, the Little Will as your second tier, and the Tram as your bottom tier. So why am I picking the bottom tier product as my number 3 pick? Because of its performance and value for the money. This is an antenna you can put on nearly any modern car, and it won't stick out too far. It won't stick out visibly too far. It's not something that's aesthetically unpleasing to the eye. So it's something you want to consider. I used it in my Toyota Echo for about 3 years, and I've used it in my Volvo station wagon for another year, and now it's just sitting in the corner collecting dust, but someday it will go on another vehicle. So a total of 4 years of outside usage, driving around every day. I never had a problem with the antenna SWR changing or anything. I never had any issue with the plastic cracking or the rubber base coming off of it or anything like that. And it's a value for the money. And of course, I'm going to give some prices, which I normally don't do, but these are as of when I'm filming this. And with hyperinflation squeezing us a little tighter every minute of every day, I highly doubt that by the time you watch this video that the prices that you hear today will be accurate, but hopefully they will still be in line with those 3 tiers. The Tram 300 costs about $38 to $48 looking online today. And so I feel like it's a great antenna. It's about a 3-foot antenna, which is not an ideal length, but honestly, performance-wise out of it was really impressive. And I have a video here. I don't know if I can leave it in the links, or I don't know how you would go about finding it. On this antenna, I did some range tests on it and even showed how to adjust SWR, as I recall. And it just worked. It worked really well. So that's my number 3 pick. If you're looking for something that is a little smaller and less visible, this is where you should start. Anything smaller than that, the 2-foot antennas, or like even my Mirage has a President Virginia on it. It's about 18 inches at most, very small antenna. That is an antenna that you could call a stealth antenna. It doesn't even look like a CB antenna, it looks like a car antenna. But its range is limited to just a few miles, and not very strong. What it is good for is highway traffic. So if you're on the highway and you want to use something, I guess that's an also mentioned antenna there. But the Tram 300 will allow you to communicate 5 miles reliably, 8 to 12 miles, sporadically if you are living in a mountainous climate like I am. All right, so that's that one. Number 2, and I swear to you that I am not being paid by Tram at all for these videos, but again, it's the same antenna as the other 2 that I'll talk about in it, so you can call it the grouping. The number 2 antenna is the Tram 3500. Now this antenna is what I replaced my 300 with on the Echo, and I got about a 1 to 2 dB gain going from the 3-foot antenna 300 to the 4-foot antenna 3500. Bigger base, bigger mount, bigger antenna. It makes sense that this antenna would perform better in all situations, and it did. I was really impressed with it, so much so that it's still in use to this day on one of my cars. It's just a great antenna. It's got a big heavy-duty magnet mount, and it just, I don't care how fast you go or what you throw at it, how much snow is on the roof or whatnot, it is just going to stick where you put it. So I really like that about it. Now the 3500 is also the twin to the Wilson, 1000, I believe, is the series on that. And they also is the K40. So if you look at the value of each, Tram 3500 being the cheapest, Wilson 1000 being somewhere in between, and the K40 being probably top tier. And so that series of antennas from the same company, the Tram is the best value. Performance-wise and durability, like again, I've never heard anybody say that they had a Tram 3500 fail. And so I don't know what kind of wattage they're throwing at. I'm using stock radios with my stuff, so it's just worked well. And so I would say that also got used for about another 4 years before it went and got you put on a car that I hardly use the radio on, to be honest with you. So that's it. And so here's some pictures of the Tram. And of course I did make a video on the Tram 3500 with range tests and installation with SWR and all the rest. It comes with a nice 18-foot long cord. And so that makes it, you don't have to have any splices in there. You don't have to have, unless you're driving something really big or putting it in an unusual spot, it's going to do just about what you need it to do. So that is that. And of course, like I said, the same as the Wilson 1000. Here's a picture of that one. And also the same as the Cobra K40. Now, there are going to be fans of those other two antennas who are going to dispute what I'm saying, and that's totally okay. Everybody has their favorites. These are my top 3 picks. And really, they're my top 3 picks, not just based on performance, because if we're going for just performance, we can go right up to the top of the scale as far as finance goes. But I'm trying to get an antenna that both offers a good value for the money as well as good performance for that money. And so the cost today, and again, hyperinflation. So I was able to find it on Amazon right now for $48 with free shipping. So that puts it at the high range of the Tram 300. And that's a pretty darn good price. And I also found it in a lot of places on eBay and other places on the web for around $68. I feel for that kind of money, it's probably not quite worth it. It's probably worth looking at another antenna. I currently am using a Stryker SR-A10 on my winter car, and that is a little bit better performance than the Tram, but also a whole lot more expensive, almost double the price if you go from the low end to what a Tram costs, or I'm sorry, to what a Stryker costs. The Stryker has some bells and whistles. It looks cool, but it's also kind of unsightly if you're not into CB radio. What it does have, and it's kind of a gimmick, but it's a cool one, is little blue lights that light up when you transmit. Very dim. It's not something that's going to get you pulled over. Blue lights are for law enforcement use, but it's not that kind of a blue light. It's just a dim blue light that comes on to let people know you're talking, and it modulates. It gets higher and lower as you speak, so it's kind of interesting. So that's my also ran, I guess, or my honorable mention if you want to spend a ton of money on an antenna in the class of the Tram 3500. And lastly, and this is probably not a surprise to many, the best antenna you can put on a mobile install is the 102 steel whip. And here's a picture of it here. And it may be a little hard to see in these pictures because it's literally just a 102-inch steel rod. Now, the 102 steel whip is a little bit deceiving. The antenna is not the only thing you're going to need if you decide to go that route. You will need a steel spring or a spring at the bottom, and it's a big fat spring. Don't get the smaller, more narrow spring. It does not have the strength to hold that antenna up. I found that out the hard way when I installed one back in the mid-90s on my Chevy Citation. There's a car you probably can't remember. I put it on the rear bumper of the Citation. I bought the smaller spring because I was trying to save a buck. Hooked it all up, took off, and the first time I was at a stop sign and hit the gas, the whip came all the way back and hit the car behind me on the hood. Luckily, it did not do any damage because I was a very poor individual and it was a BMW that it smacked. But I certainly had words with the guy. I took it and I taped it off and taped it to the bumper of the car and like ran a string inside or something and kept it hanging in there. But the 102 steel whip with the large spring. Now, mounting these can be a real trouble on a modern car. Back in my day, cars came with steel bumpers, and gosh, do I wish they still did, but they do not. I have mine mounted on my pickup truck, which thankfully does still have a full steel bumper, and you're going to find cars up through the mid to late 90s that still had steel bumpers, sometimes clad in plastic, but if you drill through the plastic, you will find a good solid steel mount. If you don't have a steel bumper, you're going to have to get more creative, and you're going to have to cause a little bit of damage to your car in order to properly mount one. The ball is what you're going to need, and that can mount sideways into the body of a car, but it requires you drilling 4 holes, 3 really small ones, and 1 big enough to pass the wire through, the main cable through there. So that's something you can consider. Here's a picture of what that looks like. You commonly saw them on Jeeps up through, when Jeeps stopped being really Jeeps. I don't know what they are now. They're just kind of SUVs, but real Jeeps. And you also saw them on really old Volkswagen buses, of all things. You'd see dual whips hanging on the sides of buses because the Westphalia buses had fiberglass tops, and you can't, put a 102 whip on there. Also on a van mount, you're going to see that because even though the earlier, like the G10s and C10 and the Ford vans, the full-size vans of the 70s and 80s and whatnot, those steel bumpers are there, but you had, several feet of metal body above it. Unlike a pickup truck where you just have maybe a foot or a foot and a half of tailgate, you had that. And so that would mess with SWR. It would also mess with the way that the signal got out. So even if you were able to tune one of those properly on a van, your signal would most likely be going backwards far more than it would be going forward. And for like traffic, you're wanting that signal to go forward. So the 102 steel whip did have its disadvantages on a van. So people would put ball mounts on the side, somewhat a foot or two below the horizon there. So it would be a much higher mount. Downsides of the 102, oh boy, yeah. So you're going to smack trees, you're going to smack branches with it. The higher you mount it, of course, the better the signal is going to be. But the higher you mount it, the more likely that the spring is going to be smacked around a lot more, that the antenna is going to be beat up a lot more, and that you're going to be coming in contact. Don't try to go through a drive-through with a 102 whip mounted. A modern pickup truck, a great place to mount a 102 whip. You put a box in the bed of the truck, and you mount the mount to the back of the toolbox. As long as it's grounded properly, you got a pretty good height, and it's great for reception and transmission. The problem being that it's so high up there, you go through a drive-through and you're going to hear it scraping along the roof. Now, I've gotten used to that sort of thing over the years, so I just let it go. I know it's not actually doing any damage. It does scare people, at drive-throughs or whatnot when they hear that, but it is what it is, so it works really well. Now, the 102 steel whip, price-wise, is a bit of it's not really telling you the truth. I was able to find it for $59, which puts it in the range of the Tram 3500, and you think, well, that's a great deal. However, shipping these things is really difficult because they're 102 inches long. It comes in usually a small tube sent to you. So a lot of people get deceived by that initial price, but it's very hard to find it. So I would say more around the lines of $99 with shipping to get one of these antennas to you. If you're lucky enough to still have a Radio Shack in your era, some of them still carry 102 whips. In fact, the one nearest to me still has 102 whips on the shelf, and they're about $55 down there last time I checked, although that's been a year or two ago. But there's more to the 102 whip. That ball is going to cost you probably $25 if you need to mount it on a ball. If you're just looking at a regular mount, figure $10 for that setup. But you also have to buy cabling because unlike the Trams and the Cobra or the K40s and the Wilsons, they don't have the cabling built into it. You have to buy that separately. So you're going to have to buy a mount. And you're going to have to buy at least 18 feet of wire to go with it. And you got to buy that spring. And that spring, again, I think I paid $18 or $19, and that's been some years ago. I didn't look up that price this morning, so you'll have to look that up on your own. But yeah, you're looking at probably $130 for a decked out 102 steel whip setup. The upside to that is you have the best. You have a quarter wave antenna, and that is just going to give you the best overall performance out of any mobile install, assuming you mount it in a good position. On my pickup truck, the 102 performs incredibly. Most people think I'm running an amp when I'm talking on that because of the range that it gets, because of the clarity that it gives. It's a really great setup. It's just one you just don't see that often because of the difficulty of installing it properly on a modern car. Now, I had a friend, this is some years back, he had an old Camaro, not an old Camaro, but a 90s Camaro, and he wanted a 102 whip. Well, he actually put it in the deck lid of his rear hatchback on the Camaro, and then, there was some sweat coming off both of us because we're drilling a hole through this dude's rear deck of his thing, creating possibly a leak. But what he did with that, and this is kind of creative, so you can get creative with that, is he drilled a small hole big enough to get his PL259 connector through, and he used washers, big washers that he picked up, like big washers, on both sides to reinforce the metal so it wouldn't flex. And then he put his mount and screwed it through that and stuck the antenna on top of it with the spring. And man, I mean, he had incredible range with that thing. I mean, it was just a foot or two below the surface. It was mounted more forward on the car, so it gave a more uniform pattern. It was incredible. So there are ways to take a 102 in a modern car if you're willing to drill a hole or two in it and really give some awesome performance out of it. Well, that's it, my friends. There are my top 3 picks for mobile install antennas and the reasons why. Price being a big factor. Price and performance being a big factor, I should say. So if there's other antennas you feel outperform these for a comparable price, I would love to know about them, because I haven't owned every antenna under the sun. I've owned some penetrators, I've owned some K40s and K30s, I've owned Wilson 5000, so I've owned a lot of antennas over the years, a lot of Radio Shack antennas, but they didn't make the list because you can't get any of them new anymore. But they used to make some decent products back in their day, and I still have 2 or 3 of them floating around here. I'd love to hear in the comments what your top 3 picks are, or at least your top 1 pick, like the best radio all around or the best antenna all around. And that'll do it. So I will see y'all next time. Take care.